Welcome to Saga Sessions, a show where we explore, analyze, and discuss our favorite stories. Today's topic is
The Rings of Power, Season 1.
Season 1. All right, I am pretty excited because this is our first ever Saga Session. I'm Colin, he's Jared, and thank you for joining us today. Let's start off by explaining how we got here. Okay, so on November 13th of 2017, it was announced that Amazon Studios had acquired the rights, the television rights specifically, to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. It wasn't just Amazon Studios who expressed interest in acquiring these television rights. We had HBO and we had Netflix in on it as well. Now, just to give credit where credit is due, this information comes from a report by The Hollywood Reporter. HBO wanted to remake The Third Age. So to me, that means they would have remade The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, just in a television format. And I don't know about you, Jared, but The Hobbit aside, I don't think The Lord of the Rings needs to be remade.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. But people will probably try to do it at some point.
I'm sure it'll happen down the line. As we all know, obviously, the Tolkien estate did not take them up on their offer to remake The Third Age. Netflix, they pitched an idea of something akin to a quote-unquote shared universe. They would have taken the Marvel approach, and by Marvel, I'm referring to Marvel Comics. The Tolkien estate did not like that. There would have been maybe an Aragorn show, perhaps a Gandalf show, and they all would have been interconnected, and it would have been, in my opinion, really strange, and I'm glad they did not do that. And now we come to Amazon Studios, which ultimately did win the rights. They had the idea of doing a show on the Second Age of Middle-earth, something that had never been touched on before, and something that we know very little about aside from what's written down in Unfinished Tales and the Silmarillion. Tolkien himself gives us very limited information on the Second Age. And the Tolkien estate went with Amazon Studios, and that's why we're here today talking about the Rings of Power. Okay, so let's move on to the television rights, what Amazon owns and what Amazon does not own. Now, Jared knows this. If there's something about the Rings of Power that I cannot stand, it's not actually something to do with the show itself. It has to do with the fandom. If I hear somebody complain one more time that, oh, this isn't the Silmarillion, this isn't anything like the Silmarillion, it's because Amazon does not own the rights to the Silmarillion. They own the rights to The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and the appendices at the end of The Lord of the Rings. So that we're all clear, they don't own the rights to the Silmarillion.
If only.
If only, yes. I 100% wish that they did own the rights because an adaptation of the Silmarillion would be fantastic. But they don't have the rights, and that's that. I'm tired of people complaining about the fact that the show isn't anything like the Silmarillion, and I could go down a huge rabbit hole about this, but I won't, because we have structure to stick with. Okay, let's go back to that day, the day that they announced that the rights had been sold. Let's go back to November 13th, 2017, Jared. Were you excited about this show? And this is before we knew what it was about. Just when we knew that Amazon had acquired the rights to make a new Lord of the Rings series. Were you excited?
Initially, not overly so. I tend to be a little bit wary when it comes to adaptations of many things, but especially Tolkien-esque things. But it's always interesting to see what, people are going to make and what ideas they're going to come up with,
Yeah, I mean, I was excited, initially. I was like, oh boy, this is really cool. This is going to be great. I don't care what they do as long as it's good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the kind of guy who, I'm pretty easy to please. I mean, as long as it's something that's in the realm of my interests, I'm going to enjoy it. And just right off the bat, I did enjoy the Rings of Power. Just saying that, I'm just putting that out there for everyone to know. Disclaimer, I enjoyed the show. But we're going to talk today about our rewatch that we did, because we both watched the show when it came out, which was a few years ago now. It's hard to believe how quickly time has flown.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. But just recently, we decided to do a rewatch, and that's what the episode is about today. Our rewatch. So let's quickly recount how we felt after we watched it the first time back in, 2022? 2022, yes. What were your initial thoughts, Jared?
Well, my initial thoughts, I was actually quite pleased and excited. Like watching the first episode, it was pretty fun just being able to kind of step back into Middle-earth again in television film form. I had a lot of fun watching the first episode. I had my critiques too. And then I enjoyed the second episode as well. I think after that, though, I started to get a little more critical.
It started to go downhill for Jared.
Yeah, and eventually I stopped watching. I don't even know what episode, although I did catch up later with you and rewatch, out of order, rewatch the final episodes at some point in 2022, I believe.
Yes, I can't remember exactly when, but I think I was watching one episode. I forget which one, but I was texting Jared about it, and Jared was like, "Sorry, man, I'm done with this show." And I'm like, "No, you can't be done with it. It's so good. We have to watch the ending together." So we did, and that's all I remember about doing that. But with season 2 coming out sometime this year, they've yet to announce it at this point in time, but I decided let's do a rewatch and let's talk about it. I loved it. I've already said this, but I loved it after watching it the first time. I was a big fan. I was definitely in the minority, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and I made sure everybody knew that I enjoyed it. But on to our thoughts after the rewatch. Let's analyze things. Okay. Main characters and storylines. Jared, who do you think is the central character of season 1?
I think there's a couple different ways you can kind of interpret that question, because I definitely think the show wants the main character to be Galadriel. Me personally, I think I enjoy Nori's story the most.
So do I.
Yeah. And it's partly, I think, because it doesn't to me seem as weighed down by some of the I guess some of the storytelling issues that to me affect other characters in the show. So it's nice to have Nori and maybe Gandalf and their ilk doing their own thing.
It's Gandalf.
Yeah, it's Gandalf. It's Gandalf.
Always follow your nose.
Right. So I think for me Nori's the main character. But how about you?
I'm going to do like a 180 from you. As much as I love Nori and I love the Stranger, aka Gandalf, I think the main character of this series or this season is Halbrand, Sauron. I think this entire season is a show about Sauron and his desire to be good. Well, if not good, at least
kind of like a peaceable pickpocket who doesn't mass murder people.
Yeah.
Try to conquer the world.
He wants Galadriel by his side so that her light can balance out his darkness. And I think Halbrand, a.k.a. Sauron, just wants a normal life. He wants a chance at redemption. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I think he is the central character of this story.
Yeah, I think there's a strong argument to be made for that. And I definitely had a fun time rewatching this season, kind of keeping that, potential interpretation in mind. It's definitely a lot more fun than the first time around trying to piece together everything that's happening.
Right.
Yeah. And Halbrand's a sympathetic character.
He is a sympathetic character. Upon rewatch, I was surprised by how sympathetic he was, because, when we watched it the first time, we didn't know he was Sauron. But obviously the second time through, all the spoilers, right? He's Sauron.
Yeah. Well, I guess you never quite know with this show. That is one thing
Yeah,
that
that's true.
they still could try to get you.
I think the main character might be Galadriel, but I think the main story arc is Sauron's desire for redemption. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it's kind of hard to pick out a story arc for Galadriel herself, just because she doesn't have too much character development, unfortunately.
Right. There was a huge debate about Galadriel, the character of Galadriel, when the show came out. A lot of people thought she was condescending. A lot of people thought that she was overbearing, rude, nasty, all the things, like just a bunch of negativity was being spewed about the character. I never really saw it the first time through. I was thinking, oh, no, she's just, playing a younger version of Kate Blanchett's Galadriel, Of course she's going to come across as authoritative and confident. Well, before I say more, what were your opinions on Galadriel when you first watched it?
I mean, I wasn't entirely critical of all her decisions as a character. I think I became more critical of them during the rewatch, and I'd seen people's reviews and stuff like that. During the first watch, I kind of just felt like she was like a sort of in like a very different from the Galadriel from the Lord of the Rings, just with the focus on, well, she struck me more as a human than like some elf that's like 1,000 years old. And that's kind of my biggest critique of her,
I can see that.
Of this depiction of Galadriel. I don't necessarily think she's an unsympathetic character though, but yeah, she does kind of, she does come off very coldly sometimes, and she lacks a lot of the sort of, the mature Galadriel that we know from the Lord of the Rings is very, like, she's a very perceptive character, a persuasive character, and this Galadriel is like almost completely the opposite. They share aloofness, but I feel like they don't share too many other personal qualities. At least that's my take.
I mean, I gotta say, after the rewatch, I hate to say it, but I'm kind of on the side of the haters. I'm not saying I hate her, but I can see where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because Morfydd Clark, maybe it's because she was drawing so much inspiration from Kate Blanchett's performance of Galadriel. Maybe she was just really trying to embody that character just in a younger form, that it didn't really work out so well. Okay, well, moving on from Galadriel, who else do we like? You mentioned Nori. I like Nori. I like Nori's storyline. I like her character. I don't like the Harfoots.
They are absurd. I mean, they're more than absurd. They're horrible, horrible people.
Yeah, they are terrible people. There's really no other way to put it. They leave you behind if you fall behind, and it's implied that they don't even just straight up leave you. They take your wheels.
Right.
So you can't travel anymore.
Yeah, and we see, like, I think her name's Melva. Like, she's actively at one point planning to, like, like,
yeah,
I don't know. I think like break someone's like Papa Nori's legs or at least his wheels. I can't remember, but it's like she's just effectively murdering these people she's lived with her whole life. It's very bizarre. I have no idea what the creators of the show were thinking when they like inserted that into the Harfoot lore, I guess.
I'm a fan of the idea of delving into Harfoot culture.
Yeah.
Tolkien described the ancestors of the hobbits. I unfortunately can't remember where. Actually, wait a minute. It has to be in the appendices because that's all they own the rights to, aside from Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. There are 3 breeds of hobbits: the Stores, the Harfoots, and the Fallowhides. So the creators obviously looked at the appendices and said, okay, we got to pick one of these and make them the main, Hobbit storyline for the season. And they picked the Harfoots, who are, like a nomadic tribe who don't settle in one place, who constantly move around. And I think the idea of exploring that culture is interesting, but they just made them look so bad.
Oh, yeah.
Just like, why?
Yeah.
Why are they terrible people? Why did they take your wheels?
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense. I do enjoy watching their antics as like during the show, but yeah, like thinking about, and in some parts are just absurd, like their sadistic ritual where they remember the people who they've like intentionally left behind.
That's right. They have everyone's names in like this big book, and they like to read the names out loud and explain, why they fell behind or what happened to them. And it's like, we wait for you. I think that's what they say.
We wait for you. And that's it's like, no, that's exactly what they don't do. It's like, you can tell, I think his name's Sadik or Sadak.
Sadik, yes.
Yeah. It almost seems like he gets some kind of like this horrible pleasure, like pausing after each name of, the Harfoots they've left behind.
Well, with all this being said, I love Nori. I think she is a great character. I think she was perfectly cast.
Yep.
I just enjoy her storyline with the Stranger, a.k.a. Gandalf. What else?
Real quick, one thing I do not like about Mute Gandalf is that...
Mute Gandalf?
Yeah, I do feel like it's not necessarily bad on its face, although it does seem like the show is using it, it's like an amnesia type of device, and it does seem like they draw it out a lot, maybe longer than they needed to, but it does bother me a little bit that like Tolkien is a linguist and he created these fictional languages and his whole world grew out of that. And, on top of that, in universe, you have like Eru singing, with all the Ainur to create, or like, I guess before they create the world, they sort of sing their plan of creation.
Right. Right.
There's kind of like, I guess, a chain of being of sorts, in Lord of the Rings myth or whatever. And you even creatures like, Gandalf would be a Maiar, so he's kind of like a lower being than the Ainur, but still higher than a lot of the beings we see in the show. But even like the elves that we see are creatures of like language and like using lots of, words. Like they even teach the Ents how to speak and stuff like that. So I find it a little bit difficult to understand why, like this Maiar, who's relatively high in this chain of being, and so much of this revolves around speech and language, and yet he just can't speak. It kind of strikes me as a little bit off.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I guess while we're on the topic of the Stranger, what I find to be really confusing about that whole storyline is the fact that the mystics, the three strange
the sand snakes.
Yes, the characters who are very akin to the sand snakes in Game of Thrones. Those three white-robed mystics mistook him for Sauron.
Mm-hmm.
Like, first of all, who are the mystics?
Yeah, they are. I mean,
why are they there?
They're the strangest characters in the show. I feel like they don't necessarily even belong. Do you feel that way?
I do. They didn't explain anything about them. They didn't explain who they were, where they came from. All we know is that they came looking for a Maiar. They found Gandalf, and they were like, "Oh, it's Sauron."
Yeah.
Then when Gandalf reveals that he's, good, they're like, "Oh, we were wrong. It's really one of them, one of the Istar."
Yeah, and they knew about them. So it's like, why did they just assume it was Sauron? It would at best be 50-50. If they knew there were going to be 5 Istari, then it's like, whatever 100 divided by 6 is, but not good odds for being Sauron.
I feel like they had plenty of time to explain some of this, and they just didn't do it.
Yeah, I feel like that's just one of my biggest criticisms of the show is maybe like their time management, especially when you consider we have 5 seasons and we have the whole Second Age to cover. There's so much that could have been done. Now, I don't think their setup is necessarily bad because there's still a lot more to explore. We have Halbrand, in Mordor, presumably Sauron, and we're going to have to go through all the, the building of the last alliance of elves and men, fighting against Sauron. Who knows what other stuff they'll toss in there? I have a feeling they'll toss a lot of references to the Third Age and stuff like that in that. So there's still plenty of time to cover, but it does kind of seem like the first season sort of setting the stage was a little botched and a little rushed at times, or like, you have like the sand snakes and it's like, do they even really add anything? I don't know.
Yeah, those sand snake / mystic characters. They just confuse me. They just confuse me. I didn't mind them so much the first time I watched the show, but upon rewatching, I was like, ugh, this is just weird. Oh, well.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe there'll be some, I've heard people think that like the M&M one is like Sauron. So who knows, maybe they'll work them in somehow. I have no idea.
I'm pretty confident Halbrand is Sauron and they're not going to, they're not going to pull the rug from under our feet and be like, whoa.
Yeah, Gandalf did kind of vaporize him, I guess. So they're seems like they're gone.
They did turn into moths.
They did, yeah.
Which is very interesting to note because Gandalf in the Lord of the Rings trilogy and in the Hobbit trilogy, actually, he speaks to moths and they come and help him. So
that's true.
Yeah, it's really bizarre that they turned into moths and perhaps they are the ones who are helping him in the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings.
Does he bind them to his
to his will? Yeah. I was talking with a friend of mine about this very thing, and instead of moths, I think it would have been cooler if he had turned them into spiders, like giant spiders.
Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah,
evil characters instead of good characters like the moths.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, I think the moths were just a symbol of Gandalf.
Yeah,
it was just another hint.
Given, I don't think we know anything like exactly where they are in the world. But I feel like they're near enough to the Greenwood that those could have been the ancestors of the spiders that, you see in Hobbit, right?
In the Hobbit, yep.
Yeah.
That's a shame.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, now I'm disappointed. Oh, well. What other good characters are there? Like, let's focus on the positives now before we get into the negatives. Do you have any storylines or characters that you like particularly enjoyed?
Well, there's the objectively best ones. I think universally agreed would be Durin, Disa, Elrond, and Durin Senior. I feel like those are
Durin the Third and Durin the Fourth.
Yeah, I feel like they're universally kind of just loved, and I feel like they do a lot of work carrying the show. For some of the weaker, there are a lot of characters, and that does not help, But yeah, like I really love the interaction between those four characters. I guess they all kind of center around Durin and Khazad-dûm, but yeah, just great all around.
I agree, and I think the casting was right on point. Owain Arthur as Durin, great pick. He played the character in a very, very reminiscent way of the dwarves we have seen before in Peter Jackson's trilogies. So there wasn't a huge disconnect in, the dwarven portrayal in the Rings of Power and the dwarven portrayals in the Peter Jackson Hobbit and Lord of the Rings trilogies. So I thought that was, a good decision on Amazon's part, a good decision on Owain Arthur's part, excuse me. Robert Aramayo as Elrond, really, really good. He was a really good pick. Although, fun fact, he actually was the second pick. He wasn't the first pick.
Oh.
Yes. They had originally cast Will Poulter as Elrond. And Will Poulter, he's been in films like The Chronicles of Narnia, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. He was Eustace Scrubb in that movie when he was a young boy. He was in Maze Runner. He's currently known for being Adam Warlock in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But he was originally Elrond. And then for whatever reason, he had to leave the production, and they cast Robert Aramayo to replace him. And I think he just did a spectacular job.
Yeah, he's great.
He's great in everything I've seen him in, which is
young Ned.
Only two things. He was indeed young Ned Stark in season 6 of Game of Thrones, and he was so good in that. So I just think he's a great actor, and I like him in the 2 shows I've seen him in. But anyways, the storyline with Elrond, Durin, the third, Durin the fourth, and Disa. Yeah, I think you're right. That is probably the most well-liked storyline in the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
Their storyline carries great weight because Mithril,
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, is incredibly important in this show. Supposedly, Mithril was created, again, in this show. I don't know if it's the case in Tolkien lore. I don't believe it is. But it was created through lightning, a Balrog, and an elf. And then it, like, spread it through the roots of a tree and grew and formed under the mountain.
Yeah, I wasn't even... I didn't totally try to pay attention to all of Mithril's properties in the rewatch, but even kind of trying to pay attention, I couldn't really. It's just like magical MacGuffin thing, you know? But
yeah, which evidently they needed to make the rings, or the three elven rings of power.
Yeah. And that was such a small amount of Mithril, and it struck me watching them, you know, use it to forge those three rings. Like, Frodo's coat, like, wouldn't that have been enormously powerful magical object? Like, I mean, I know it's very valuable, you know, but I mean, it's just really good armor, you know, in the previous iterations of Lord of the Ringsy things. But here it seems like they could have melted that down and made their own rings of powers. It almost seems like, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
But maybe they didn't have Celebrimbor, but I mean, I'm sure they could have done a lot with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure why Mithril was such a major plot device in this show, but okay.
Yeah. It doesn't get in the way so much. It's just kind of bizarre.
No, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Bizarre is the right word for it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We got reintroduced to the Balrog.
Yeah.
Which I presume is the same Balrog that we see Gandalf fight in the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yeah, I feel like that might have been maybe a studio mandate. They're like, we got to have a Balrog in season 1.
Well, if it was a studio mandate, I am okay with it. I loved that scene when the leaf just floats to the bottom. Well, drops, but it's floating up, like floats to the bottom of the cavern, and then the Balrog awakes. Yeah, so cool. So cool. And we're going to learn why it's called Durin's Bane in a later season.
We will. I don't think it'll go well for Durin, or at least one of the Durins.
Yeah, which Durin?
Which
the
Durin?
Father or the son?
Yeah.
Or both. Hopefully not both. But
Yeah.
Okay, good storylines. We talked about Nori and The Stranger. We talked about the, Elrond and Durin. Are we out of good storylines?
Well, okay, maybe, but we do have important characters.
We do.
Arondir, Bronwyn, and Theo. I say Theo's like a good storyline.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
He's certainly an intriguing character.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And the reason I say he's intriguing is he seems too random of a character to just be a nobody. So I feel like he has some part to play in later iterations of Middle-earth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like he might turn out to be a character that we've known all along, like the Witch King of Angmar. I don't know how he would end up becoming a king of men and, you know, all that. But I feel like Theo is somebody that we have met already. We just don't know who. And when I say met already, I mean somebody we've met from like the Peter Jackson stories.
Yeah. I think that's a strong theory. Strong idea.
Arondir is cool. Ismael Cruz Cordova plays the character, I think, very well. Bronwyn is also really cool. Their romance is, I think, it leaves a little to be desired.
Yeah. They definitely both are a little bit like wooden almost, you know, especially when they're interacting with each other. Hopefully that doesn't continue into the next season.
Their strongest moments are when they're actually apart, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
When they're off doing their own things, but when they're together, it's like, okay, this is a little contrived.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. And they have some decent moments with Theo too. Definitely Bronwyn. But together it seems like they're like a couple that's kind of like on a little bit on the rocks or something in their relationship, but
Well, let's ask the important question. Is Theo their son?
I choose to believe so, but
I think so too. I mean, he's
Yeah.
definitely Bronwyn's son,
Mhm.
but I think he's Arondir's son as well.
Yeah.
It's important to note that his ears are constantly covered up by his hair.
Yeah. I like that mystery intrigue of his ears.
Now, I don't think he actually has elf ears, even though they go to a lot of trouble to hiding them, pardon me, because, when he was a baby and he was, fresh out of the womb, like, how would they have hidden his elf ears? So I don't think he has elf ears, but it was interesting to note that, they cover his ears constantly.
Yeah, and until we see his ears in a good shot, I'm gonna stick with the theory that they're Borny.
Okay.
Even if it has a little merit to it.
I'm cool with that. I just remembered one of my other favorite characters who doesn't really have a storyline, but I think they are well written and well portrayed by none other than Uncle Benjamin Stark himself, Joseph Maul, and that is Adar. I'm a big fan of Adar. I think the concept of having one of the first orcs around is really cool. I think it's awesome that he is the leader of the orcs in the Second Age and that he's trying to build a home for them. What are your thoughts on Adar?
I to some degree have the opposite take.
Oh.
Because I find it kind of I don't quite understand how he can be like one of the first orcs but not completely be an orc. Because to me it seems like the torture that Morgoth put elves through to create orcs like would have warped them beyond repair, which makes them orcs. That's how I've always seen it.
So you don't think he's mutilated enough?
Yeah, I think he should be full orc. Other than that, I like his character. He's definitely a sympathetic villain. I wish there was more with Adar in this season because he's kind of just...
So do I.
Yeah, he's kind of just tucked in there at the end, and we don't get to see too much of him. It's also funny how he cares more for these orcs than the Harfoots care for their own. It's like kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But
sympathetic villain.
Yeah. And by the way, just on the orcs, it's great to see the live action prosthetic orcs.
Oh yes,
it's so good. Yeah.
After the Hobbit trilogy, which I don't think we saw a single prosthetic orc. Everything was CGI. It was so nice to go back to having men, women in prosthetic makeup.
Yeah. It definitely makes all the difference.
It does. Very refreshing. Now, real quick, before we move on to another character or another storyline, back to Adar. As much as I like the character, he is in one of the dumbest scenes, or I should say he's the subject of one of the dumbest collection of scenes in the show, and that's where we see him chained up in that stable where Galadriel is interrogating him. This is toward the end of the season. And then when Mordor is being created, when the floodgates are released, right, and the mountain is exploding and the pyroclastic flow comes out, we see Adar laying on the ground chained up, putting his ear to the ground to like listen for something. And then the next time we see the stable, he's just gone. His chains are just laying there on the ground. And it's like, how did Adar get out of his chains? It doesn't explain it.
Yeah, that point, I think that exact moment in the show is where it all just crumbles to me, because it's like, how does the like water being released? Well, first of all, why is this magic sword like the key? It's almost like in a video game, you turn this.
It is
key
very
and
much like a
something
video
happens,
game. Yeah,
and then the water bursts forth, and then somehow that like goes to set off a like chain reaction of events, which I can buy to some degree, but then it makes Mount Doom erupt, and then all of a sudden Mordor's here like 100%. That to me, and on top of it, Adar. And he has a pretty decent moment with Galadriel. He also, I think, reveals himself to be more, a little bit more. He has some depth to him that Galadriel doesn't necessarily have in the show, in that
True.
particular scene. But then he's just gone, like you said, and it's just like, what is going on anymore. I mean, we do arrive at, after that event happens, we arrive at kind of where we need to be going into the future, with Mordor being there and everything, but it's very abrupt,
So here's a question I have, and maybe you can help me answer it, because I can't do it alone. I've tried ever since the show came out, and I just can't do it. Adar and Sauron are not friends. Like, it's clear.
Right.
Adar even claims he killed Sauron. So maybe he did, and maybe Sauron just took on another form, the form of Halbrand. We know that Mordor is Sauron's domain. So who was behind the creation of Mordor? Was it Adar, or was it Sauron, or was it like a group effort?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I assume that Sauron intended to recreate Mordor, and he had that gate that could be opened with that busted sword, or perhaps another one, I don't know. But, I presume it was Sauron who set that up to, like, happen when he was ready to return.
Right.
But yeah, what Adar, I mean, I guess maybe Adar helped to build that gate, or maybe once he wielded that sword. I don't know. I'm sure we'll find some things out in the future.
I'm sure we will, but for the time being, I'm just very confused.
Yeah, and that's another element too. I forgot to mention when I was talking about that whole sequence happening, but it's just like, it's very confusing. It's like, what is happening right now?
Especially considering the season ends with Sauron entering his domain on foot. It gives off the vibe that this is Sauron's domain, which it is. This is his realm, but the show gave us the impression that Adar had it made for his orcs, for his people.
Yeah.
So I just don't understand.
And it kind of begs the question, like, did Sauron, being, the master manipulator, did he kind of set all this up, beforehand? And
that's possible.
Or maybe he really was trying to get away from his old life, and
whole time he was a good guy, I'm telling you.
Yeah, and then he just, he didn't want Mordor to be recreated, but then he found himself there, and through no fault of his own, besides setting up the whole thing in the first place.
Right.
Like, he just finds himself back there, and he's like, well, I guess I'll just go back to being the old Sauron. It's right here in front of me for the taking, It's an interesting idea. It's a fun idea for Halbrand.
Yeah. Yep, also possible. Until season 2 proves me wrong, I will stick to the theory that Sauron wanted to be a good guy.
Yeah, and Galadriel.
She ruined everything. She ruined everything.
Yeah.
She should have taken him up on his offer. How do you feel about the prospect? I mean, we can't have it now, but how would you have felt about a Galadriel and Sauron romance?
I mean, the thought of it, makes me want to vomit. But in the context of Rings of Power, with Halbrand and sort of this, alternative, bizarro pseudo Galadriel, I'm okay with it.
Sure.
Having heard that idea, I'm okay with it.
Okay. I mean, for me, as long as it makes Sauron a better person, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I like the idea of a Sauron who just wants to get away from the evil world and live a peaceful life with a beacon of light by his side.
Yeah. And given our Galadriel and some of her, like, character faults or ways that she could grow, she could learn a lot from Halbrand, because he's kind of a man of the world, and he's canny, I guess you could say, like, street smart, stuff like that. And she's very like stodgy, very single-minded in her goals, but she could kind of maybe ease off a little bit. I don't know exactly how it would all come down if the one goal she's single-minded in is finding Sauron, but as she's pursuing that, Sauron's the guy who teaches her to sort of let loose a little bit and not be so narrow-minded or whatever.
Sure,
it'd be an interesting dynamic if they went with it. But I'm not against it.
Oh yeah, real quick before we move on to another character. In case you didn't know, they had to recast Adar for season 2. the new actor is Sam Hazeldine. I am sad because I loved Joseph Mawle in the role. I thought he did a fantastic job. I don't know why he left. He tweeted out a very cryptic message about why he was leaving, and it really gave us no explanation. But we have a new Adar. Hopefully, Sam Hazeldine, you do as well as your predecessor. Okay, I think the next batch of characters is the Númenorians.
Oh yes, yeah, we have Mr. Númenorians.
I don't like the Númenorians.
I don't either. Although Elendil is great. He just doesn't get there. We could use more Elendil in this show. We could.
When I say I don't like the Númenorians, I should be more specific. I'm not saying I don't like the characters. I don't like the storyline.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I suppose I misspoke a bit. So let's just talk about Númenor like as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
The set, gorgeous, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I would have imagined, everything I wanted,
yeah,
I got.
I do have one critique. With
Númenor. Really? What is
it? It's a small one. Like as far as the setting goes, I do find it bizarre. You know, we've seen in the show. What do we see? Valmar. We see Linden. We see
what's
Eregion.
Valmar?
I think it's the capital of Valinor. I'm pretty sure it's Valmar.
Oh, okay.
But I think we see it by the two trees. It could be another.
Gotcha.
It could be another city in Valinor. I actually don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure Valmar is the one that's close to the two trees. But I'm not actually sure if they're in the same shot together. I can't remember. But we see those, and there's like a similar architectural style running throughout. We see that as the basis for all the grand buildings in Númenor itself, and then of course we see in the Peter Jackson movies. You know, we see Gondor, and it follows the same kind of architectural style. They sort of went a little sideways with that in Númenor, which isn't inherently bad. I just don't think it fits into that timeline because I think they went, you know, since Númenor's inspired by Atlantis, I think they went with like an ancient Greek kind of theme, especially with some of the more minor buildings and maybe newer ones that are more, maybe less of the elvish side of Númenor and more towards the mannish side of Númenor. And the colors of the buildings that they paint are very much like that ancient Greek color. And it looks good. I just think it looks more like I'm watching like something about ancient Rome rather than like a kind of, you know, the Númenorians should have like Gondor type architecture, but even grander, you know. That's how I feel. So it's a small digression, but it does kind of distract a little bit for me. You know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, valid point. With that being said, the storyline for Númenor, not great.
Mm-hmm.
The characters, we got some good characters. We got some not so good characters.
Mm-hmm.
The good
Mixed
characters, it's very much a mixed bag. The good characters, we've mentioned Elendil already. Mm-hmm. I think he's great. Mm-hmm. I'm very curious to see what they do with Isildur because if you're a fan of the Peter Jackson trilogy for Lord of the Rings, or even a fan of the Lord of the Rings the novel, you know who Isildur is. You know what happens to him. You know his storyline with the One Ring, cutting it from Sauron's hand, taking it for himself. You know all that. So,
and in a way, we haven't seen too much of Isildur, but in a way, like we were talking about earlier, the main protagonist of the show, in a way, potentially, this could be his show. You know, just given what we know about his story and how this show is probably going to play out through the 5 seasons, I think he's definitely going to be, arguably the main character.
Okay, so they gave Isildur a sister in this. Her name escapes me. They all sound the same. She has an interesting little subplot of wanting to become like an architect.
Oh, yeah.
And then they kind of give her a cliffhanger ending in the season where she meets the exiled king, and then she lifts the veil or the we'll call it a veil. The veil off the Palantir.
I forgot about that,
Yeah, and then it, cuts to another scene. So she now has the Palantir, one would assume. So what are they going to do with that storyline? We'll find out. We have I guess he's like the prime minister of Númenor, Pharazôn.
Yeah, I think he's a great character.
You like him?
I like him, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
really? Okay. I don't.
Oh, yeah?
But
Why not?
I just find him unnecessary. I think
Oh, okay.
we have Queen Muriel. I feel like we have the queen. We don't really need the chancellor, prime minister, whatever his title is.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point because she has whatever she's got going on versus Tar, whatever her father's name is. She's Tar Miriel, I think, and he's Tar something.
Oh, Tar Palantir?
Tar Palantir. Oh yeah, Farseeing or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Tar Palantir. So and she's not. She doesn't seem like she's the biggest fan of his policies. And she's
they exiled him.
But I know in the Legendarium, our Pharazôn, like he's the leader of like the King's Men or something, and they overthrow. He marries Tar Miriel, and then they overthrow.
Is Pharazôn actually in Tolkien lore?
Yeah, our Pharazôn, and I think it's his.
I didn't know that.
I think the our Pharazôn is like the newer form that shows they're not connected to the elves with like the tar prefix. They use the R one.
Oh,
I think I could be misremembering.
I had no idea, and I fancy myself a student of Tolkien lore.
I do too, but it's so easy to forget all this stuff. There's
there's
so
a
much
lot.
stuff,
There is quite a bit.
Yeah.
And Pharazôn has a son in the show, and I don't remember his name.
Yeah, he might be the worst character in the show.
He's just pointless. He serves no purpose other than to serve as a potential love interest for the sister of Isildur, whose name I also can't remember.
And he's got that toga. He just looks out of place here. I was actually hoping in that scene where the boat catches on fire and like that
he would die.
Well, either he would die or he would lose his robe. One of the two. I can't remember exactly.
That he would lose his robe.
Yeah, just the robe. As long as the robe goes, I'll be content. If it requires his like death, then I'm fine with that too. But I think we're going to be stuck with the robe at least for another couple episodes. We'll see.
Well, it's unfortunate that I'm so bad with names today. I mean, they're not really that important anyway in terms of the characters.
Yeah, but that does speak to I think this show could have used a lot, like whatever else they decided to do with it. I think Númenor is the heart of the Second Age, and I think we should have seen a larger Númenor, because we really just kind of see the main city, whatever it's called. I don't know if it's. I don't remember if it has its own name. I'm sure it does, but
I don't think they mentioned a name.
Yeah, they didn't mention it in the show. They just call it Númenor. But it is a vast island. We just see the one city. We hear that Elendil's from the western part of the island, but that's about it. And I think we really should have focused on Númenor instead of all this other, trekking around these other parts of Middle Earth. I think we could have cut down on some of that and really centered Númenor as the place that's kind of the heart. I mean, it's where Aragorn's ancestors come from,
right?
And of course we're gonna see it fall, through its own kind of hubris or whatever. So I think they really could have spent more time there, fleshing it out. We could get some politics in,
right?
Understand different characters' motivations. That would have really, really helped it go a long way.
Well, back to my Sauron theory, Sauron/Halbrand theory. I think he just wanted to stay there in Númenor and just make a life for himself.
Right. Yeah.
He even tells Galadriel, I did everything I did because you asked me to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So
and he acclimates himself to like Númenor. It's like the first couple of days they get there, it seems like he loves it,
She says something to him like, "You told me you were the king of the Southlands," and he's like, "I never said that. You said that I was."
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He just wanted to be like a not so innocent pickpocket, but better than being the Dark Lord,
Right. Yeah, Númenor. I think Númenor is the weakest storyline in the whole series. So far, at least in season 1, which is very, very unfortunate, because when I, heard about the show being or taking place in the Second Age.
Yeah.
I was super, super pumped to see Númenor on screen. And
I mean,
again,
it's the most exciting part of the Second Age, I feel like. Númenor.
Right.
It's so cool.
Yeah. And again, we touched on the look and feel of the the kingdom itself, and you brought up some good points about it's like too much like Atlantis or too much like ancient Greece or something like that. And while your point is valid and good, I still think it's a glorious set piece.
Oh yeah, it is awesome to see. Well, I will say there are a few scenes in Númenor where it looks more like you're at like a Disney theme park. But most of the shots with the characters talking in it are like their surroundings are really beautiful, So like,
I wish you hadn't said that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Now
Yeah.
I can't unsee it.
Well, yeah, there's a couple shots. It's really just 3 that stand out in my mind. Unfortunately, the first one is when they first get off in the docks in the city. To me, it really looks like those are theme park, costumed workers,
I can see it.
unloading all their fake wares, their pretend wares.
All right, well, I guess that's enough about Númenor. Who was your favorite character in the entire season? Do you have one?
I think Nori is my favorite, but it's hard to say because Durin and Disa and Elrond, they're really good too. I think it kind of depends maybe, but I think I would say all 4 of them together. I think that's my best answer.
For me, I would say while her storyline is not my favorite storyline, my favorite storyline is the Khazad-dûm storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Nori's my favorite character.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
The Harfoot storyline is blah.
Yeah, yeah. And yet there's still some nice moments with them. And it doesn't make much sense because there's nice moments. No, I feel like Nori's interactions with all the Harfoots really are quite nice and natural. I don't know why they're so intent on their like sociopathic society, but beyond that, it's a pleasant little group of people,
In the final episode, when the stranger can we just say Gandalf?
Yeah, Gandalf.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we could be proven wrong in the next season, but I am standing firm by my belief that it's Gandalf. When Gandalf can finally speak and he and Nori, exchange dialogue, some of my favorite lines in the whole show are spoken between Nori and Gandalf. Like when he says to her, "One goes on a journey alone, but adventures are meant to be shared."
Mm-hmm.
I love that line. That just feels very adventurous to me. Very, it feels like it's in the spirit of Tolkien.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that. And that's the classic Gandalf, Bilbo, Gandalf, Frodo, the same kind of relationship.
Right.
In this case, he's sort of figuring out, I guess, who he is, but, still has the same spirit despite that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I think our favorite character collectively is Nori.
Mm-hmm.
I would say.
Yeah. I guess Halbrand gets an honorable mention.
Just I do like Halbrand too.
Trying to be good. Trying to be the good guy.
Adar and Halbrand are both at a close second for me. Let's talk about one of my favorite aspects of the show so far, and I expect it to only get better with each season. Bear McCreary's score. Oh man, it's good.
Yeah, it is very good.
He is a talented composer. Some of his more notable, recognizable work, Outlander, the Stars series. He composes the score for Outlander. He composed the score for God of War and God of War Ragnarok. So yeah, he does some good work, and Rings of Power is no exception. He is a worthy successor to Howard Shore in terms of score. I love his score for Khazad-dûm, especially.
Yeah,
that's
a
good
great
one.
Yeah.
Do you have is there any specific track that stands out to you?
Khazad-dûm is my favorite one. I am not crazy about, I guess, Where the Shadows Lie. It's just the vocalization on it.
The song that plays over the end credits.
Yeah, and that this kind of stuff happens a lot. It's kind of a token of these big fantasy productions nowadays, where they have, like, Game of Thrones had the Reigns of Castamere, but they always have a very modern, I guess, just the style of how it's sung strikes me as very modern. The Witcher series had a song too.
Oh yeah, toss a coin to
yeah.
the witch. Yeah, I don't want to get cited for for singing that. But.
Yeah, it's not that the songs are bad. It's just they pull me right into the 21st century, and I feel like the point of fantasy is usually to get back to some admittedly imaginary past. But
well, thankfully for people like Jared, there is also an instrumental version of Where the Shadows Lie. So
which is quite nice. Yeah.
Yes, the orchestration is great, even if the singer is too contemporary.
Mm-hmm. I did appreciate hearing the song though. As it played after we finished the last episode on the rewatch.
Right.
It was a nice touch then.
Now that we have finished our rewatch, have our opinions on season 1 changed?
I would say I guess it depends on how you define opinions, like how precise you want to get with the opinions. Overall, I don't think my opinion has changed that much of the season.
Okay.
Yeah, but I definitely appreciated looking at it again and kind of like finding different things in it. It's kind of inspired me to get. I haven't read any like Tolkien stuff besides rereading Lord of the Rings in like 15 years, so I kind of want to further explore that kind of stuff. Not that is directly related to Rings of Power, but yeah, I would say one thing I did come across, which I've mentioned to you before, Brandon Sanderson was talking about the show, and he was saying that a lot of the potential like ways in which the show might have been kneecapped could have come directly from the studio itself.
That doesn't surprise me one bit.
And I tend to blame like the showrunners and the writers for these kind of mishaps, which is still fair, I think, in the case for this show. But rewatching it with that in mind, did make me a little more sympathetic to some of what I view as pitfalls that happen in the show itself. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah. I have to say that upon rewatching the whole season, I liked it less. Or I should say I like it less now than I did before, which is very unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
I still enjoy it. It's something I would watch again, but I was able to see all the problems with it this time because the first time I watched it, I was just geeking out because it was Middle Earth, more Middle Earth content. This is great. I've been waiting a long time for this. But now that the hype has gone down, the dust has settled, watching it with you, in a very, analytical way. Just there's so many glaring problems with it, and we've discussed some of those issues, and they're hard to ignore right now. So I definitely feel like the rewatch impacted my opinion in a negative way. Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I rewatched it, and I already said I'll watch it again, but I'm never gonna feel as in love with it as I did before, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and another thing too, I got just preparing for all this, rewatching, like, I guess a clip of Colbert interviewing the showrunners and the actors before the show was actually released. It was cool to see the actors themselves, talking about their roles before anyone knew what the show was going to be like, and that does affect a little bit of how, I've viewed the show upon rewatching it.
So for me, it's I view it in more of a negative light, and you are still kind of like you feel the same.
Yeah, I would say
okay.
Yeah, mine's I would say definitely a negative light for this show, unfortunately. But well, actually, one thing that did stand out to me upon rewatching was the actual a lot of the like scenery. Because of course, a lot of the money for this show went to the scenery. Now, the first time I watched the show, aside from like the first 2 episodes, which I was really genuinely excited about upon watching them for the first time, I got so frustrated with what the characters were doing and really what the writers were making the characters do, I guess, that like I didn't really see much of the scenery because I was just not focusing on it. I was just like, what the heck is going on, you know? But watching it again, you know, I definitely could kind of stop and smell the roses a little bit and just look at all the, you know, backgrounds they made. And like, there's a beautiful tapestry. I think it might be in the second episode when Galadriel first goes to Linden, I think. Maybe it's in the first episode. I don't remember. But it didn't really stand out to me the first time I watched it. But watching it again, it's like I really noticed all that stuff, which a lot of people did notice the first time they watched it. But to me, I missed it because I was kind of like heated, you know? So that was nice to see.
If you had creative control, Jared, what would you have changed to make season 1 better?
Oh, there's a lot of things I think I would have changed. Númenor would probably be the biggest, as we were kind of talking about before.
Right. I would have made Númenor different. I would have made the storyline of Númenor. I would have made the plot more engaging, more interesting, because it was just bland.
Yeah, we probably could have cut down on some character interactions, or even just spread them out among different episodes.
Right.
You know, just since we have so many to work with.
In regards to the Harfoots, I don't know if Tolkien explicitly said that they were nomads. If they weren't nomads in Tolkien's appendices, I wouldn't have made them nomads in the show.
That's fair.
I need to do some research and figure out if they were meant to be that way. I think that the nomadic life kind of dragged them down a bit as a culture. I can't really express why, but
yeah, I mean there's a lot going on there, because I don't remember exactly what Tolkien said either, but I feel like they were sort of like rather, you know, I mean they did wander like all the peoples of Middle Earth in the past, but I feel like they did kind of settle down. Yeah, sort of like Gollum's ancestors.
The Stores.
Little settlements, yeah.
The Stores settled by the Riverlands, I believe. The Fallowhides founded the Shire, and it's entirely possible that the Harfoots were nomads.
Yeah, it is.
Again, I have to check, the Tolkien, legendarium.
Yeah.
So if they were nomads, and everything I'm saying is completely, invalidated. But
yeah, I don't think it's completely invalidated, because they do take some elements a little over the top, which doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, hurt the Harfoots themselves. But yeah, it is a little bit much, like all their outfits, like Sadek's, what's his name? Sorry.
Yeah, Sadek, you got it right. Yeah.
His headdress, it feels to me like he bought it at like Michael's, like the craft store,
right,
and like the autumn discount section. And like, it's not bad, but it's like, is this really going anywhere? Or it's a little cartoony almost. And I mean, it's less cartoony than like, the actual Hobbit cartoons, so, or it's more cartoony. So
more
it is
cartoony than the Rankin Bass Hobbit. Yep.
Which are excellent, of course, but yeah.
Very good. Very good. Yes. I feel like we covered, a broad range of complaints, some good stuff too, but we expressed, our discontent for a good many things. Now for the $1 million question. If Tolkien were alive today, what would he have thought of season 1 of The Rings of Power?
Well, I feel like to some degree this is a bit of a loaded question, because I think Tolkien would not have liked any or most or any of the,
I don't even think Tolkien would have liked Peter Jackson's.
I agree. Yeah. And movies. I have my criticisms of Peter Jackson's movies as well. Although, I mean, they are definitely classics, and they're what got me into the whole Lord of the Rings in the first place. But yeah, I don't think he would have liked them very much at all. I can see Tolkien basically despising like almost everything, but some part of me feels like he would have kind of been all right with the Rankin Bass Hobbit. I found a letter, I guess, that he wrote to a guy named Zimmerman, who tried to, he wanted to write a movie script of the Lord of the Rings when Tolkien still lived. But I feel like some of the things he wrote in the letter do describe how a lot of people, including myself, feel about the Rings of Power. One great quote says, "If Zimmerman and or others do so, They may be irritated or aggrieved by the tone of many of my criticisms. If so, I am sorry, though not surprised, but I would ask them to make an effort of imagination sufficient to understand the irritation and on occasion the resentment of an author who finds increasingly as he proceeds his work treated as it would seem carelessly in general, in places recklessly, and with no evident signs of any appreciation of what it is all about. The canons of narrative art in any medium cannot be wholly different, and the failure of poor films is often precisely an exaggeration and in the intrusion of unwanted matter owing to not perceiving where the core of the original lies. I feel like that last bit, that last little phrase kind of describes Rings of Power in a nutshell.
Wow, okay. That was quite a quote. Good job.
Yeah, but I think he would have felt that way about a lot of other things that most of us like.
So I think we can both agree Tolkien is probably rolling in his grave as we speak right now.
And maybe Christopher too. Is he dead? I can't remember.
Christopher Tolkien did indeed pass away.
Okay, I thought so. R.I.P.
Yes. So
two greats right there.
But here's the interesting part. The Rings of Power was produced with the help of the Tolkien estate. In fact, the Tolkien estate put into the contract that they would work closely with Amazon Studios. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. I do wish Amazon would take a little bit more time to just, I'm really hoping in these future seasons, they just make use of what they can, be creative, take some risks. They're not going to recreate the Silmarillion as you laid out, and they're not going to create their own legal version, their own version of the Silmarillion, which alludes to it. So I think they should go wild, get creative. Obviously, you want to kind of keep it Tolkien-esque, but I think they shouldn't be afraid to really push the boundaries where they can and try to. They can't use certain things because of legal reasons, but there's things that inspired Tolkien, and you could draw from that. You know what I mean? I think there's potential for things they could do, and just they've already created their own thing, whether that's what they intended to do or not. So they should just run with that and do their best with it, I think.
Okay, now here's the moment we've all been waiting for. On a scale of 1 to 10, rank season 1 of The Rings of Power. You want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I think some people might consider this a bit of a low ball, but I'm going to go 4 out of 10.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think it's watchable, but it can be incredibly frustrating. Yeah, especially at least for me, the first time I was watching it. There's a lot of bad writing, there's a lot of bad dialogue, and kind of just confusing world building in general, which again is just all the more bizarre because you're in a world that already has sort of been created, even with the limitations that they face in making the show. But the show is not without its charm, And I think too, one thing, they could focus maybe a little bit less on the billions of dollars for all the CGI backgrounds or whatever they're spending it on, and maybe focus a little bit more on the charming aspects of the show that they have kind of stumbled across, and really build on those. I think it could go a long way.
Okay, cool. I'm going to have to go with the fanboy in me wants to say 6, but I have to give it a 5. If I were giving this a rating after watching it just once, it would have been a 7. But as I mentioned earlier, upon rewatch, I like it less. So that 7 has to drop down to a 5 now, because there are just so many problems with this show.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I want these I want to will these problems to go away. I want to will them to be fixed. I want them to just, float off into the distance, like a miracle.
Like traveling into Valinor, just
yes, I want them to just go off into the sunrise or sunset. Go off into the sun and go away to Valinor. But they can't. There are some glaring issues with this series right now. So 5 it is. 5 it is, and it pains me to say that.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised you went that low.
No, I've been putting a lot of thought into it.
All right.
It's it's average.
Yeah.
It's average.
Yeah, I mean, for me too, it's just Galadriel. Like, I want to like her so much, and I don't despise her, but Galadriel is one of my absolute favorite characters in Lord of the Rings, and I really love Lothlorien as well. And it just kind of hurts. It's like an extra little twist of the knife, it's just not quite have her be everything she could be in this series.
Let us know what you think of The Rings of Power Season 1, and if whether or not you are looking forward to Season 2. Thank you for attending this Saga Session. We hope to see you again soon. Until next time.